coming to this review point where I have this view that there are 10 points you should never walk away from the first meeting without. And I do mean this, the first meeting. And I mean this as the first meeting with every member of the decision-making unit. It might feel as though that there's some repetition and some reiteration of this, and there is. I want you to ask these questions and be aware of everyone's position on all of these points. So everyone in the DMU will have a view on these. You need to be asking these questions for your own good, and for your own good to qualify your first intent, and then ultimately to enable you to put a value proposition together. And as I said before, the time to ask these is at your first meeting. Before you've shown the customer you can solve their problem. You ask these because at the first meeting, this is where the customer may have the problem or they has the big opportunity, and in both cases they will be looking for you to engage. In other words, they need you to engage at this point. So now, as a return courtesy, they should be giving you more information. Does that make sense? It feels a bit counterintuitive sometimes. People think, oh, isn't it cheeky? Isn't it like an interrogation? Well, no. It might feel like it from your point of view, but the other party thinks you're getting engaged. They think you are deeply interested in what they're doing. And in most cases, we are. Because without being interested in what they're doing, we can't make a value proposition later on. So, these are the 10 things. And I'll give you, obviously, you've got copies of this for ongoing meeting activities. The first question is, do you know why this customer is going to change? I'm sorry if it seems as though I keep beating this same drum, but the point about it is, if you don't know why the customer is going to change, you will not be able to help them change. If you can't help them change, they won't give you their money. Simple as that. Is it a problem that they want to solve? Is it an opportunity? And then, of course, as you go through each member of the DMU, they will have a different view on this. It's quite possible you're going to have someone who sees it as a problem, some will see it as an opportunity, and others just won't care. Ask everyone. Second, is it a compelling event? Each member of the DMU has the right to have a different compelling event, or if not a different compelling event, a different view on the compelling event. And of course, embedded in this, what I want to know is, if there is a compelling event, is it imminent? My preference would be a compelling event this month than a compelling event next January. Then the next one is, have we identified the full decision-making unit? Now, it's usually easier in big organisations, because you can ask about the decision-making unit as part of the purchasing process. The question I usually employ is, and who else other than you is involved in the decision? So what you do is you include the person you're with, but what you don't do is you don't exclude the possibility of there being other people. So you give due respect to the person you're with, but give the possibility that there are many more people involved. And at this point, and they say, oh yes, there are other people, always follow up and say, so who are they? It's not being rude, it's not being cheeky. You need to go and find these people, because you're going to be of assistance to them to develop their solution for their problems. The second thing that we're looking for in the identification, of course, as well, is, are they available to us? In some cases, you're going to be involved in deals where maybe you're involved with multinational organisations, and maybe the decision-making unit process is being done in the UK, but maybe the final decision is going to be made in New York, or it's being made in Sweden. In either case, what you have to do is you've got to know where it is so you can control your engagement. I'm not saying for 1 minute you have to be running around the North Atlantic or the Northern Europe seaboard, but at least you need to know where you're compromising your knowledge and your engagement. The fourth one we're looking for here is, who's the competition? I mean, we've talked about it, but is there a like competition, and who else is being considered? It's not rude to ask. And quite often in the very first meeting, when someone says, oh well, these are the people we're looking at, I will always ask them and say, why are they being considered? And there's usually a couple of good reasons. One might be, well, they're our current supplier. I need to know that. If they already have an incumbent supplier, which is going to be one of my competition, I want to know. And I'd say, well, these are someone who've been recommended by the CEO. Well, I need to know that as well. If someone is being recommended by the CEO and therefore could be potentially an anti-champion of mine at a high level in the organisation, I want to know that. Or the other one is, well, we've got 4 people involved because our purchasing process says we need these many people for audit rules. So when you ask the question why they're being considered, you get 3 very different types. I mean, there are other answers, obviously, but these are the key different types of answers you get, which help you then formulate your strategy for engagement with this person you're talking to, and then where you go next with the rest of the DMU. Are there any unlike solutions? Quite often you get that when you ask the next level of questions about a like competition. Quite often they will bring up unlike solutions. I need you to be a bit braver here. I need you to be a little bit more disciplined in your planning and think about the possibility of unlike solutions. Then have the guts to ask the question. So here's the incumbent supplier. Here's the people you've gone out to tender for. Who else could be competing to solve this problem? Or who else are you looking at that will help you take advantage of this opportunity? Are there different ways of doing this? Be prepared for the customer not to understand why you're asking the question. But equally, we talked about discipline and integrity as a salesperson. At this point, if the customer says, why are you asking the question? Tell them the honest answer. And say, I'm looking for the breadth of my competition to enable me to put my strategy together to win this business. I don't think anyone would be upset with that, would they? They know why you're there. You're there to win the business, hopefully in a way that is valuable to both parties. You get list price and they get more than list price value out of it. So that's what we should be aiming for. Unlike solutions quite often come after we've talked about it. Then, question that I really need you to ask yourself is this person with a coach or a champion or a potential for either? And of course, there is a big differential. So quite often we get coaches and champions mixed up because we've got a pal who works for the customer. We pitch up, have a discussion with them, talk to them about normal circumstances, have a discussion about what we've done in the past for them, and then we find that they're not part of the next decision-making unit, but we're spending time understanding about them. That's a coach relationship. It's useful, but it's less useful than someone who will be a champion in the DMU. And the only reason they will be a champion in the DMU, and forgive me if this sounds a little bit too cynical, but it's come from experience, the reason they will be a champion in the DMU is if there's something in it for them. They won't be doing it for you, they'll be doing it for themselves. A coach will be doing it for you and for the relationship. A champion will be doing it for themselves. I hope you see that a champion can also be a coach as well, but a champion is more valuable than a coach at any point. Of course, when we start looking at anti-champions, or we start looking at economic champions, then we start devising our own understanding for this decision-making unit. We're getting to a point now in the decision-making unit where if we start looking for economic champions, we're going to have a good chance of winning this deal. If we're recognising anti-champions, they are going to be putting difficulties in our way, they're going to be putting boundaries down for us. And then the final 3 all come at a rush in many ways. I need you in the first meeting to start looking for the pain in this. It's not enough for the customer to say they're interested in your product. It's not enough for the customer to say they like your product. People will not change if it is not satisfying some part of their business requirements. Pain and the reduction or the removal of pain is the key reason they will buy your product or service. You need to be drilling down deeper with all of your prepared questions as to where the pain could be. Now, with each product, with each service we sell, there are different possible pressure points. You need to be planning beforehand with the distinct and total knowledge of your product. What could their pain be? Then asking questions to uncover if it's true or not. And at that point, we need to then be looking at, well, what would be the value of the solution? And then the final one is, if, and this comes back to Wayne's point before, if we are actually talking about competition. We need to know what our value is to these people. And with Scott's point before about abstract value propositions, we need to be looking at the whole return on investment formula, the whole solution value, and which pain is it going to satisfy when it actually gets delivered. And then we go back through the decision-making unit, the compelling event, the reason for doing it, and the competitive analysis. It's all here. I promise you, if you do more of this, you'll win more business.